Okay, for this next video, we are now going to talk about slope. What slope is a kind of rate of change that has to deal with the incline of a linear, of a line, right? Of the graph of a linear equation, which makes a line, which is why it's called linear equation. So you can see over here in this picture that the book provides right here, right? That they've got this line here, and it's going from left to right, it's going up, all right? And they give you these 2 points, and for most of you this is a little bit of a review, but what I want to do is just relate this kind of to what we've been talking about. And if we look at this part down here, right, it says rise over run. So it's how much does it go up or down versus how far does it go over. And I always use really specific language in here, and I always say from left to right. How far does it go over from left to right? And we're just looking at this right now. We're going to look at this in a minute, but we're looking at this right now. So if you think about that in terms of what we were talking about with rate, your up and down is your y-coordinate, right? It's your y. It's how much does it change in y, versus your left to right is how much does it change in x. And so when you're finding this off of any kind of a graph like what they have here, basically what they do is they just tell you just make a little triangle, right? Just make a right triangle. And so I would go like that. That's my run, right? That's how far it goes over from this point to this point. And then this right here represents how far does it rise from there to there. And so your rise, all right, so that would be your rise. This would be your run. And then you just put it in terms of numbers. And that's where this formula kind of comes into play, is if you get good with using the formula, then you don't have to draw these pictures, right? And we want to get away from needing pictures to do this because we can do it a lot quicker if we just know the formula. So the way they write the formula is they have this big y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And basically all it means is you're going to, and I'm going to erase this here so you can see this a little better. You're going to start with one pair of coordinates. They give you two points, right? So you're going to start with one pair of coordinates. So let's start with this one. It doesn't matter which one, and you're going to line them up in this equation, you know, and you're just going to take, you're going to start with the y value from one of those coordinates, right? So I'm going to start with this right here. So I take that, and then I'm going to subtract from it the y from the other coordinate. All right? I don't want to do that. Because you're finding the difference. You're finding the difference from one to the other. And then you do the same thing with the x coordinates, and the only thing you have to make sure you do is if you start with the y coordinate from this one over here, then you've got to start with that x coordinate. You can't flip-flop them, right? And so that's why they have them numbered and lettered like that. And so let's just look at some examples of this, and I think this will start to make some sense to you. And like I said, I think for some of you, you've done this before. So it says, find the slope of a line that passes through each pair of points, -2, 0, and 1, 5. So if I were to draw a graph of this, all right, -2, 0 would put me about here. 1, 5 is going to put me up about here. And so I'm going to have a line that kind of goes like that, right? Sorry, that's a little crooked, but that's the idea, right? And we've got -2, 0, and we've got 1, 5. And so if I were to look at this in terms of building this out as a triangle, right, I would have something like that. And then for rise over run, well, your rise is going to be how much does this go over? Well, or how much does this go up or down? All right, well, it's always from left to right, is it going up or down? So from left to right, this thing is going up, right? And it's going up 5 units. It's going up, and the reason I know that is because my y-coordinate right here is 0, and then my y-coordinate right here is 5. So the difference between 5 and 0, so what I'm doing is I'm figuring out what my change in my y is. That's what that triangle means, change in. It's the Greek letter delta. So my change in my y is from 5 minus 0. So I'm figuring out using this one and this one. I'm just doing 5 minus 0. And then I just got to figure out what my respective change in x is. So in other words, what's my change this way? Okay, well, because I started with 5, I have to start with 1. So 1 minus, and then my second coordinate is negative 2. So it's 1 minus negative 2. And then what happens is you simplify this. So you get 5 on your top. 1 minus a minus becomes 1 plus 2, which turns into 3. And so that means that I have a vertical rise of 5 from left to right for every 3 that I go over. And that makes sense, right? Because I know from negative 2 to 1, if I were to count it, it would be 1, 2, 3, right? And then my rise would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this way we can find this without having to do any of that, right? This is great, but we want to be able to do this without that. All right, B, similarly, we can do the same thing because we've got 2 pairs of points. They're written kind of weird, but this is 1 pair of points, this set right here, and then this is another pair of points. And I'll do this in orange, right, if it ever starts working. There we go. And so I'm going to write this out the same way. I'm going to do my change in y. So it doesn't matter if I start with this one or this one, right? I'm going to start with one of them. So let's start with the one on the left. So I'm going to take my y coordinate. I'm going to go 4. I'm going to go minus. And I'm going to take my y coordinate from my next one, which is negative 3. It's this one right here, right? Sorry, my pen is super glitchy right now. So 4 minus a negative 3. So that's my change in y. It's going from 4 to negative 3. If you think about how far that is on a number line and how many spaces you would count, that's how you find that. And then because you started with 4, you start with negative 3 for your x. So we're going from negative 3 and then finding the distance by subtracting the next coordinate from it, which is 2. All right, now just simplify this. So 4 minus a minus 3 gives me positive 7 because that's 4 plus 3. And then negative 3 minus 2 is the same as negative 3 plus negative 2, which is negative 5. And so you get a slope of negative 7/5. All right, and I'm going to rewrite this. And so what that means is when you have a negative in front of a slope, you always apply it to the y. So that means it goes down 7 for every 5 units that it goes over from left to right. Okay, this last one we are going to do completely no picture. All right, so let's just start with, let's show this works, and let's start with this one. So I'm going to write my y coordinate goes on top, so negative 1 minus, and then here's my next y coordinate, got negative 1. And then I'm going to use the corresponding x coordinate that corresponds to negative 1, so that's negative 3, minus 2. All right, I'm just plugging the numbers in. All right, well, negative 1 plus 1, because a minus is plus, is 0. All right, and then negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5. And 0 divided by anything is 0. And so you have a slope of 0. And so what this will give you is this will give you a line that is just a flat line that has no slope. If you have a slope of 0, it means you're completely on a flat surface, right? You're not going up and you're not going down. You know, in this one right here, you were going down. This one up here, you were going up. So it's just another representation, and it does count for something, but it just means it's flat, and there's no rate of change. If you started at negative 3, you were at negative 1 for your y, and when you went over 5 units, you were still at negative 1. So it's kind of like you just walked from one ladder over to the other ladder, but didn't go any higher. Okay, so this is kind of the basic idea of how you are finding slope here. Okay, it's a pretty a pretty common thing. So what I want you guys to do for the sake of this video is I want you to stop the video and try these 3 problems. And then I will go over these with you. Okay, let's do this first one. So we've got your first set of coordinates is this one right here. And your second set of coordinates is this one right here. So let's start with our y from our first one, which is 6, minus, and then our next y is this, is 8. All right, now we put our x coordinates on the bottom. So because I started with 6, I have to start with 3. Do 3 minus 4. Simplify it, and you get negative 2 over negative 1. Negative divided by negative is positive, and anything divided by 1 is itself. So it simplifies to 2, and we will call this m. This is something I didn't mention earlier, but the book likes to call slope m. That's the mathematical variable that they always use for slope. All right, this next one, it's the same deal. It's just written in a different orientation. So here's my y. Let's start with that. Minus, and here's another y, negative 2. I see a double negative going on there. Because I started with this one, I got to start with that x. So I have negative 4 minus 0. And so if I simplify this, break this down and I simplify this, I get negative 2 plus 2 over negative 4 minus 0. And this breaks down to, that's going to be 0. Over negative 4, which is just good old 0. So my m is equal to 0. So that is a flat line from left to right. All right, and then for 4c, same deal. Let's start with this y. 2 minus 10. Now I start with that x, negative 4 minus a negative 2. All right? And you notice how I'm always writing my minus signs before I even know what the other coordinates are. And that's so that I don't like miss something or forget to put it in there, because some of these, sometimes it's easy to confuse that, oh, well, I have a negative sign written down. Does that apply to the coordinate, or does that apply to the fact that I'm subtracting it? Because they're different. All right, so 2 minus 10 is negative 8. And then negative 4 plus 2, so this becomes plus 2, is negative 2. Negative divided by a negative is positive, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So your slope is 4. So if you got these answers, that's awesome. I hope this slope thing is making a little more sense to you. If you need more practice with it, there's tons of spots on the internet you can go and look at and get more practice. There's some great Khan Academy videos, so feel free to use any of those resources.